dance for joy or lust or anger, and every time you haven't got it right, you're one of us.
Welcome to Sensible Secondhand Classics, the show where we look at nostalgic cars that you can buy over 15 years old for a budget of between £1,000 and £5,000. This is a 1981 MGB Roadster, and it's one of the most successful sports cars ever in the history of the world. But is it any good? Should you care? Let's find out. The MGB was first launched in 1962. The front suspension and the steering are actually largely unchanged from the previous MGA. They did try to update the rear suspension by trying some quite modern arrangements, but in the end they decided to go for a live axle with leaf springs, which wasn't the most advanced technology at the time, but it kind of worked. I'm amazed at this car, considering it has no power steering, how light the steering is, and it's lots of feel in it. From what I understand, they used that system, which actually dated back to the 1940s in the MGYA, because, you know, it was seen as quite good. And it's certainly, you know, it's light enough at many speeds, and also there's plenty of feel in it, so, you know, that was obviously a good solution. I do hope you can hear me, by the way, viewers. There's not much I can do about driving around with the roof off and wind noise. I'm afraid that's just the way that it is. So initially this 1.8 engine developed about 95 horsepower. It gradually got a bit less due to emissions regulations over the course of the production life of the car. It's unfortunate that actually these were discontinued when the Abingdon factory closed in 1980. They were criminally sort of underdeveloped during the kind of later years, and the major sort of modification at the time was the fitment of the rubber bumpers. This interior was you know, one of the later interiors that they fitted. The earlier ones do look a bit more sort of classic than this, but this is okay. There were some other engines available with the MGB. There was a V8 version, which was made from 1973 to 1976, and that was only available with GT. GT had been introduced in 1965. It was designed by Farina, whereas a Roadster actually wasn't, but they're both very nice looking cars. The GT had that option of the V8 engine with 137 horsepower. It was the Rover 3.5 litre V8. I'm amazed actually they didn't fit that in the car before 73. But never mind, those are very sought after now. You can pay in excess of £20,000 for one of those. You can also buy an MGC. That was the 2.9 straight 6 engine out of the Austin Healey 3000. Those are only made for a couple of years, from 1967 to 1969. The reason why they discontinued them was because although the engine had more power, even with the V8, 145 horsepower, they're so heavy that they upset the handler, and you didn't get that much more performance out of them. 60 is about 10 seconds, principally because of the weight of the engine. The V8s, you know, they're a lot more sought after, I think, than the MGCs for some reason, although you do see MGCs around. Gearbox in this car's still kind of running in a bit. I've been asked to take a bit of care with it. So here we are, viewers, by the side of a little country lane in Hampshire, in the mottled shade of a summer's day. I think this car looks pretty good. I mean, it's not like the original design from 1962, but considering this is a really late one, registered in 1981, built 1980, I think it looks great. The rubber bumper models are becoming, I think, a bit more sought after than they used to be. People used to tear the bumpers off immediately when they bought one. This one has actually preserved its original look and also its original paintwork. It's never been welded, it's never been painted, which is amazing. It's had a reconditioned engine put in it, but it looks really great. It's not the same colour as the one driven by John Lumley in the New Avengers. It's a slightly different shade of yellow. But to me, I'm just getting vibes of watching all those episodes that were filmed in the summer of '76 of the New Avengers and seeing John Lumley drive this car around the back lanes near Pinewood Studios. So original dealer plates as far as I know. Open up the boot. Very sort of clever, self-supporting strut there. I can see why a lot of people who have MGB Roadsters put the spare wheel on top of the boot, because there's not an awful lot of room in there when you've got the spare in there. You can see the Roadster wheels on this car are 165/80 14s. They've got sort of a toolkit and things in here. I'm not sure I can actually do this boot up and down with one hand. I think I need a second hand to actually do that catch, which I will do. Reversing lights, and because this is a 1981 registration, we've got fog lamps as well, all very useful. The seats in this car would have originally had some stripes on them, as per the later cars, but these have been replaced with some vinyl ones, and the steering wheel was replaced, I think, quite early on with this Motorlita aftermarket wheel, which looks really good. I don't mind the sort of plastic steering wheel which these later MGBs would have come with, but I think this one looks fine as well. They've got inertia reel seat belts, although the inertia reel is a little bit worn out. I much prefer those to fixed seat belts. I have this thing about fixed seat belts. The interior door handles are the same as so many British Leyland cars of this era. Morris Marina, the Allegro, and then just loads and loads of Sherpa, then the Leyland vans and the DAF vans and the Leyland DAFs and the LDVs. They all used these interior door handles until I think the mid-90s. This looks very familiar in terms of the steering column. I think this is out of a Triumph, actually, judging by headlamp switch being there. And of course the indicator stalks on the right, wiper stalks on the left. Interior light is just down here. It's a tiny little thing there. We've got various, I think, switches. I think these are also sort of out of some other BL cars of the time. And then we've got this really interesting set of heater and ventilation controls that look very, very 70s, don't they? Very 70s. Original Motorola radio, varies for choke. Shouldn't actually need that today. Oil pressure gauge is just here. Typical of, you know, sporty cars of the time, although I wouldn't consider it of 85 horsepower that this car has to be an awful lot, but it's enough. Variable instrument dimming there, and a massive lorry that's just passing me. Thank you. So yeah, that's the direction of the air, and that's, I think, the actual fan speed. I think you only get one speed. That's all you get. That's not very good, is it? Never mind. Just open the windows, don't you? You've got quarter lights as well on this. The windows I will keep up. I've taken off the tonneau for the passenger as well, though there's nobody sitting there, just so I can just show you things. See if we can get into the... Oh gosh, that's difficult getting in the glove box. I don't think my secret mission documents are going in there, are they, viewers? They're not going in there at all. This car's got overdrive. This is the third type of overdrive. They have it's a Laycock system on this. And it's engaged just with this little switch there. Earlier MGBs of overdrive would have had on the steering column, I think on a little stalk. Very easy to read the instruments, apart from perhaps the oil pressure gauge you can't really see. The temperature gauge is there again. You can't see that as well as I'd expect, really. But you can see the fuel gauge, and there's the full beam light on there as well. Other than that, there's not really an awful lot to say. It's only got 2 seats. The GT version did have some rear seats, but, well, they're not very useful particularly. when I was younger, a friend of mine at primary school, his father had a BGT with the later rubber bumpers like this one, and he used to go in the back of that, but there's not a lot of room. We've stored the tonneaus in here. I'm not going to take this roof off, this tonneau off of the roof and put a roof up, because that will just take an age. And on a day like today, I don't see why I need the roof on, which is fine. I hope you agree that actually the car looks best with the roof off like this. Got a little retractable aerial there. We've only got 2 wipers on this. Certain MGBs did come with 3 wipers. I think principally the American market ones at a certain time had 3 wipers. I mean, that would look great, a bit like a Jaguar E-Type. In fact, you know, the BGT and even this normal B were sort of always compared to the E-Type as like a poor man's E-Type, and I can see why you might think that, having driven one, you know, locally to this area. Right, let's have a look at the engine. So this is the 1.8 B series engine, which develops in this application around 84 horsepower. When these cars were new, up until the early 70s, they produced about 95 horsepower for our market. The Americans got a bit less, I think. But gradually, over the course of many, many years, the power was reduced down, I think as low in some cases, about 82 horsepower. The Callaghan spec cars could have as little as 70 horsepower. This one, it seems fast enough, 0 to 60, I think, with the sort of lower powered later engine like this, is about 18 seconds. It feels swift enough. There's lots of torque actually. That's one thing I've noticed. The torque is good. All cars from, I think it was 1975, came with a brake servo like this one. It's actually not a remote one, it's right in front of the driver, which is good. I get a bit scared about, you know, relatively large cars with no servo brakes. This car should have like I think an Austin Rover type badge on this valve cover at the top. But this has actually had a different one put on because that one was a bit nasty when the engine was rebuilt. They just decided to change it. Got the twin carb setup on here, which sounds good. Chain cam engine. Now what I'm going to do is put a link in the video description to some common MGB issues as listed on the Honest John Classics website. And that will give a bit more information. But there's loads of other sites you can look at. There's always the they call the Classic MGB YouTube channel, which gives you more information about these cars. They are very, very, very well served in terms of the classic scene. You can get all sorts of parts. You can get upgraded parts. You can, you know, get entirely new body shells if that's what you want. In fact, the MGR V8 of the early 90s came into being because they realised that you could just, you know, take one of these you know, brand new body shells and make an upgraded MGB essentially out of them. That's how the RV8 came about. This one though, it's never been welded, it's never been resprayed, it's in remarkable condition really, and yeah, I think it's time to go for another drive. Lloyd Vehicle Consulting stickers, t-shirts and mugs are available by clicking the link to the Google form in the video description below. Always have to remember as well that the indicator stalks on the right hand side in this car. So first, there we go, all synchromesh blocks on this. These cars didn't have all synchromesh gearboxes until 1968. And a heater was an option, I think, until 1966. The brake servo was an option until 1975, I believe. That seems a bit of a stretch to me, but apparently that's the case, according to one source that I read. So they weren't the most sophisticated cars, but they just kept on selling. The reason why we discontinued them was because they thought the Triumph TR7 needed to have no competition. That was the car that had been sort of developed to sort of replace a lot of the MG and Triumph ranges that were going throughout the 70s. But unfortunately the TR7 sold not that well, and they had to close down production of that the next year in 1981. So the closure of the Abingdon factory in 1980, which was really not the best idea, that was one of the most loyal factories British Leyland actually had to the Midland estate, to the extent that a consortium led by the chap who owned Aston Martin Lagonda at the time tried to buy the factory and the MG name and the design to the MGB to put a new version of the B into production in 1981, but ultimately British Leyland didn't let them do it. There were other attempts to replace the MGB as early as 1964. I think the car was called the EX234, and there was also the AD076 that came along and was supposed to replace it, but actually that type number was given in the end to the rubber bumper version of the MGB that came out in late 1974 for the 75 model year. Just driving this car along on the roads of the New Forest and being extremely careful to not get anywhere near the ponies is absolutely and utterly delightful. I'm very privileged to say that this car is actually going to be up for sale soon. It belongs to the family of Max, who works at Discount MG Rover Spares near Southampton, and he's very kindly allowed me to have a go in this today. The car's done less than 39,000 miles from new. It was owned by a chap quite local to here in a place called Fordingbridge for a number of years. Bodywork is very good, the engine's been rebuilt, and so is this transmission. Just flick it into overdrive and see what happens. Ooh, that's good. Wow. Yeah, I actually like this a lot more than I expected to do so. I've heard really bad things about the leaf spring suspension in the back and things like that, but this one seems pretty good. A lot of these have rusted away, and a lot of them have had problems with the valve stem oil seals and things like that happen as the engines get older. But this one, it's freshly rebuilt engine and gearbox with this remarkably original bodywork. It's valued at around £12,000, I think. Obviously you can pick up an MGB for less than £5,000 incredibly easily. Actually, it's not difficult to find one for that kind of money at all. In fact, there are some on there with an MOT for even less than that. I wouldn't necessarily recommend buying one of them for really cheap money, because you'll just have a bit of a project on your hands and it might just be a little bit too much. One like this though, or even the V8s, which are going to be more expensive, are just very pleasant ways to drive around the countryside in the summer, as I'm doing now. And I'm just really privileged to have finally been able to get behind the wheel of one of these after so many years of actually wanting to do it. They're not the fastest cars, they're not the rarest cars, they're not even probably the best handling cars of their time. There is something about them that is just so utterly endearing, and I think, having had to go in this one, I do understand why that might be. So viewers, the MGB, is this a car that you should consider with your hard-earned budget of between £1,000 and £5,000 as a sensible second-hand classic? Well, parts availability is amazing for these. The owners' clubs are very large for them. There's several of them, and this is, for many, the classic sports car of any period. It depends if you really want that. I mean, you're not going to stand out in an MGB unless it's a really special one, because there's just so many of them. I think there's over 10,000 of them still on the road, which it's really good in one way, but if you want to be individual, then that's maybe not the way to go about it. But I actually found this a surprising amount of fun. I found it more fun than I expected it to be, and I'm very glad to have finally scratched the itch to drive one of these after first seeing Joe and Alumni drive one of these in the mid-1990s. Anyway, thank you ever so much indeed once again for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, leave a comment below, and we shall see you again soon for more reasonably priced nostalgic motoring.
Every blue day, every day with blue skies, and on every occasion that you do or don't smile. Every time you dance for joy,